Have you ever felt like someone is quietly watching you, not in a public place, but right in the neighborhood where you live? Maybe you're just watering plants, picking up mail, or simply stepping outside, but somehow that gaze is always there. Not every glance is harmless, and not every neighbor is just someone who lives nearby. In today's video, we'll explore 5 subtle yet alarming signs that your friendly neighbor might be watching you more closely than you think. Don't take your eyes off the video. What you're about to learn will not only keep you alert but might also change the way you view privacy in your own home. If you find this topic important and interesting, don't forget to hit subscribe and follow so you won't miss valuable content coming up. You might call it intuition. You might also call it a survival instinct, something that has helped humans endure thousands of years of hunting, fleeing, and surviving in the wild. Today, we no longer have to run from lions or wild beasts. But there is a more subtle, less obvious kind of threat, one that makes you glance back when locking your door, that makes you hesitate before closing the curtains every time that accidental gaze appears from the other side of the fence. A neighbor who surveils you is not simply curious. They act as if they've been assigned a mission. They don't care where you go or what you do, they care about knowing everything. And it's this silent obsession that makes you feel trapped within your own territory. Let me tell you something strange. A woman I once talked to, let's call her Linda, had lived peacefully in a small house in a quiet neighborhood for nearly 15 years. Then a new neighbor moved in. At first, Linda thought it was just over-friendly behavior. Harmless questions like, "What are you up to today?" or "Saw your lights on late last night." But gradually, those questions turned into chilling remarks. "You got home late last night, didn't you? Almost 11 p.m. Or, "You didn't leave the house this morning, huh?" Linda started to realize she wasn't just being seen, she was being recorded. That is the crucial difference. A curious neighbor might notice things accidentally, but a neighbor who watches you is observing you systematically. They create patterns, build your schedule in their mind as if you're a project to study. They turn your normal actions, like picking up mail, watering plants, driving to work, into entries in their invisible diary. And when you start feeling like you have to perform in your own yard, that's a clear sign something is wrong. The scary part isn't any one behavior, but the deliberate repetition of it. Someone who is always, coincidentally, there every time you step outside. A gaze that lingers longer than necessary. An overly silent presence when you appear. No need for cameras, bugs, or fancy technology. The kind of neighbor surveillance happens with eyes, timing, and persistence. If something makes you uneasy, don't dismiss it as just being too sensitive. That feeling is the gift of vigilance. And sometimes, that vigilance is the thin line between safety and having your life invaded. You might think that being watched only happens in thrillers or spy stories. But sometimes, the real threat is just a fence away. No need for bugging devices, sunglasses, or long coats. Just a persistent gaze, a habit of watching long enough to turn your most private moments into something they feel entitled to interfere with. And it's the quietness of how they do it that's the scariest part. Because it makes you feel like you're living inside a glass jar, where every movement is monitored, yet no one speaks of it. The danger lies in deliberate repetition. Once might be accidental. Twice might be coincidence. But by the 3rd or 4th time, when you change your schedule and they change theirs accordingly, that's a pattern. And a pattern is the first warning you should listen to. A neighbor who, coincidentally, appears every time you step out, water plants, or collect mail is no longer normal. They're not just watching you. They're waiting for you. How you react to the situation is where you regain control. And that control doesn't come from direct confrontation or living in fear, but from actively watching back. You become the data collector. You observe, record, and remember, not to fuel paranoia, but to build a protective wall of awareness. Because if you can't control others' actions, you can always control your response to them. Sometimes, just a small change in your routine is enough to make those watching you reveal themselves. They'll be awkward when you leave earlier than usual. They'll be confused if you park somewhere different. They'll change their behavior when they can no longer predict you. And that's your chance to determine whether you're being watched deliberately. You can also choose smart silence instead of confrontation. A security camera tucked away in a corner, an app that logs movement times, or simply a notebook to record strange occurrences. These things don't just help protect your peace, they are evidence. And in a world where privacy can be invaded by just a glance, evidence is the strongest shield you can hold. Remember, you're not paranoid, you're vigilant. And sometimes, that vigilance is the only thing standing between you and a world controlled by the gaze of those who have no right to see you so clearly. What makes this type of digital surveillance even more dangerous is its invisibility. No broken doors, no one tailing you down the street, and no unusual noises to warn you. But you feel it. Something is wrong. You can't explain it, but you find yourself acting differently. You change your passwords frequently, check your windows more at night, and every time the porch light flickers, your heart skips a beat. This isn't paranoia. It's intuition alerted by subtle, persistent signals. Security cameras are no longer just tools to protect property. They can become instruments to satisfy someone else's control. When a neighbor deliberately points a camera lens toward your bedroom window, it's no longer a defensive measure, it's a deliberate invasion. Worse, it's often disguised under a thin veil of legality. It's just a wide-angle view. But you know it's not accidental. When the lens, coincidentally, always aims where you are, when your Wi-Fi signal gets strangely disrupted every time you use personal devices, you're not imagining things, you're being targeted. And you need to act before suspicion turns into exhaustion. In the digital age, where privacy can be stolen with just an app or a cheap device, defense is no longer just about locking doors and drawing curtains. It's about vigilance. It's about checking every connected device in your home. It's about using software to detect spying devices. It's about asking your neighbor to adjust their camera angle, straightforwardly, legally, but firmly. You don't do this out of anger. You do it with the awareness that privacy isn't a privilege, but your basic right. And if emotions still overwhelm you, stress, anxiety, sleepless nights, the first thing you need to do is pause and acknowledge, I feel unsafe, and this feeling is valid. From there, you can regain control. Because the intruder doesn't just want to breach your living space, they want to invade your mind, make you doubt yourself, make you silent. Don't let that happen. Start by listening to yourself. Protect your digital space as you protect your front door. Act like David, no panic, no blame, but clear, strategic, and uncompromising. This isn't just about surveillance, this is about freedom. And freedom begins with the ability to recognize when you're being watched, even if the watcher never crosses the threshold. This silent invasion doesn't always come from sophisticated technology. Sometimes, it disguises itself in seemingly harmless actions. A neighbor, coincidentally, passing by just as you step outside. A question that's too specific about your daily routine. A gaze that's always present at the upstairs window. And gradually, you realize a chilling truth. The person hurting you doesn't need to hack any system, because they have learned how to hack the comfort of your everyday life. When privacy disappears, it doesn't explode, it melts away. Quietly and persistently. One day, you stop in front of the mirror and see that you have changed. Not in appearance, but in behavior. You become overly cautious stepping into the yard. You no longer sit by the window with a cup of tea as before. You turn the music down. You hang up calls midway just because you feel someone is eavesdropping. No one orders you to do these things. But the fear of being watched has taken control. That is the most terrifying form of control. The kind that requires no chains, no locked doors, only planting the doubt that you are being watched. And the heartbreaking part is that most people silently endure it, because they fear being labeled paranoid, afraid of being called too sensitive. But to protect yourself, you cannot live just to be agreeable. You need to be vigilant. Listening to your instincts is not weakness, it is intelligence. You don't need to shout or accuse. You only need to observe, record, and act. You have the right to reset boundaries in your living space. You have the right to ask questions if a camera is accidentally pointed at your yard. You have the right to upgrade your home network to block digital intrusion. You have the right to name the threat, even if it's invisible, and say, I do not accept this. Because when you stay silent, you're not being polite, you're gradually losing the real part of your life. And as Marcus Aurelius reminded us, You have the right not to attend to things unworthy of your mind. But you also have the responsibility not to let those things quietly drain your inner strength. Technology can be controlled. The environment can be reset. But willpower and peace, those are the last fortress you must not lose. Reclaim your sovereignty, both physical and mental. Not with anger, but with clarity. Not with fear, but with understanding. And above all, remember, when you no longer feel like yourself in your own home, it's time to demand that peace back. No one has the right to take it away. No one. When a neighbor knows too much about your private life without your permission, it's no longer ordinary concern. It is an intrusion and a takeover of control. They don't just stand outside watching. They penetrate every hidden corner you thought only you knew. This undermines the inherent safety of your home. The place you once believed was the only space where you could lower all barriers and be yourself. But now, every gesture, every habit, every personal choice seems exposed under invisible eyes, making you feel like you're living in a movie you're not directing. You begin to realize it's not just random details, but a carefully woven picture made from tiny fragments that the watcher uses to manipulate and control you silently. Information about your schedule, the things you buy, the calls you take, all are recorded, stored, and analyzed, becoming invisible weapons that strip away your autonomy. This control isn't as obvious as a locked door. It seeps into every breath, every sleep, every thought. What's most alarming is that when you're unaware you're being watched, you unknowingly give others the power to design your life, a design in which you have no voice. You think you're living freely, but in reality, you've become the main character in someone else's story, manipulated from within. This violation of privacy creates a heavy mental burden, not always immediately recognizable. It makes you lose freedom in deciding your own life. You no longer dare to open up to anyone, no longer share your true thoughts or private dreams. Every step, every action is carefully weighed under the watcher's gaze, as if you're imprisoned in an invisible jail. But you don't have to let this continue. Recognizing these signs is the first step to reclaiming control of your life and mind. Remember, privacy is not a default you have to trade off in modern life. It is an essential right, a protective armor for your dignity and peace of mind. You need to rebuild those invisible walls with willpower, vigilance, and action. Take the initiative to learn and apply digital security measures to keep your personal information under control. Consider changing passwords regularly, using security apps and firewalls to block uninvited curious eyes. At the same time, don't hesitate to ask questions, issue warnings, and when necessary, seek help from authorities to protect yourself and your loved ones. Life is yours. No one has the right or power to take away the small yet precious details that belong to you. Don't let silent intrusion make you doubt yourself or lose safety in your own home. Be brave and proactive in reclaiming control to live a life that is not only free but whole, with respect for yourself and your right to privacy. The fourth sign can no longer be ignored or dismissed like the vague suspicions before. When you start noticing clear physical traces around your property, unexplained scratches on the gate, small scraps of paper or strange devices discarded near the windows, or even unfamiliar footprints on the lawn when you are not home, these are direct warnings that you are being intentionally and systematically monitored. These are no longer hypotheses or oversensitive feelings, but vivid evidence that your sacred space has been violated. You are not only losing your mental sense of security but may also be facing real threats to your privacy and personal safety. In an era where the boundary between the physical world and the digital world increasingly blurs, the presence of these physical signs indicates an even more sophisticated plan. A plan that does not rely solely on technology to track you but also exploits the surrounding environment, turning familiar spaces into zones of unease. And you, who once considered your home a sanctuary, now live in constant anxiety, questioning who is nearby, who is listening, and whether you are being isolated within your own life. But in every situation, you still have the right to choose how to respond. Unlike sudden anger or resigned helplessness, wise action lies in building a strategic protection plan, one that maintains calmness while preserving your sovereignty. Start by carefully observing every small detail around your home, documenting anything unusual, and if necessary, Installing appropriate security devices to control your private space. Remember, protecting your privacy is not the act of a vulnerable person, but of a mature individual who knows how to care for and defend themselves. At the same time, never forget that privacy is not only a physical barrier separating the outside world but also a strong inner armor. Keeping your mind unbreached, not manipulated by fear or excessive worry, is the way you rebuild true freedom. Do not let others steal the peace within you, even if they can take away physical spaces. Marcus Aurelius once reminded us that true strength lies in our ability to control our reactions to external events. And in this battle to protect your privacy, you are the sole commander who decides which spaces are allowed to exist and which must be closed off. Thorough preparation, smart vigilance, and steadfastness in defending your personal space will not only help you maintain safety but also bring profound peace to your soul. This is how you build an invisible, sturdy fortress that resists invisible yet very real threats. So, don't wait until it's too late to realize the value of preparation and self-protection. Act today, because freedom is not a gift granted to us but something we must persistently claim, step by step, in this increasingly complex world. When those physical signs begin to appear, they are not merely trivial changes in your living space. They are silent warnings of a boundary being crossed, the boundary between what is allowed and what is forbidden, between sacred privacy and unconscious or deliberate intrusion. No one wants to live in a state of insecurity within their own home, a place that should be the safest sanctuary. But once small things, like a rug slightly shifted, a potted plant turned in a different direction, or a mailbox showing unusual signs, become reality, your mental peace can no longer remain intact. That is when doubt, anxiety, and the feeling of being watched slowly creep into every corner of your life. These are not just inanimate objects. Every altered detail carries a hidden message, an invisible challenge that you no longer have control over your own space as before. And this wounds deeper than any material loss. It is a spiritual hurt. Because when privacy is violated, you are no longer yourself within that space. Every step you take, every gesture you make may have been monitored. Every secret, every private moment could be exposed or manipulated by those who do not respect your boundaries. In this context, ignoring these seemingly minor signs is to pave the way for even deeper intrusion. That is why security experts always emphasize the importance of setting up simple yet effective warning systems, like an invisible but sturdy protective layer. A small piece of transparent tape carefully placed on the door frame, a tiny slip of paper tucked between the door and its frame, or even just a hairpin accidentally left where it shouldn't be, can all serve as tools for you to immediately detect when someone has breached your space. These small tools carry great meaning because they empower you, the right to know and the right to respond promptly. No one has the right to steal the peace of your mind. No one can take away your safety in your private space without facing resistance. It is this smart vigilance and deliberate action that create an invisible wall of protection that any intruder must consider before crossing. You are not just protecting your belongings, you are protecting your freedom, your dignity, and yourself. Remember, privacy is a sacred right of every individual. It cannot be bargained away or ignored. When you begin to listen to the small signs, when you choose to act instead of endure, you are not only protecting your home but also safeguarding your soul from the deepest and most invisible wounds. And that is the first step in reclaiming the peace that belongs to you, right in the space you call home. When a neighbor's initial curiosity begins to turn into a persistent obsession, it is no longer a trivial matter. It is like a silent but dangerous undercurrent gradually eroding the last boundary between privacy and intrusion. Their behavior no longer stops at sneaky glances or fake social chit-chat but escalates to following your every step and interfering in the smallest aspects of your life. At that point, you don't just feel uneasy, you start to feel afraid. Recall the times they accidentally appear where you least expect them, or the repeated unwanted messages and calls that make you feel watched to the extent that your freedom of thought and action is compromised. This obsession is not only an intrusion into your physical space but also a direct threat to the peace of your mind. Once the obsession becomes part of your daily life, it slowly strips away the sense of security you once had in your own home. Privacy and personal security experts warn that in over 70% of stalking cases, victims knew the stalker early on but often ignored the signs, thinking it was just normal concern or harmless curiosity. But in reality, this escalation never happens suddenly. It is a cumulative process, gradually penetrating deeper into your life until you can no longer resist. Recognizing and admitting that you have become the target of someone's obsession is the crucial first step toward regaining control. From a Stoic perspective, while you may not be able to stop others from doing what they want, you always have the right to choose how you respond. Maintaining calm and rationality in such situations is not about tolerating abuse, but rather a strategy to protect yourself most effectively. Document every unusual behavior, build solid evidence, and seek support from authorities as a way to safeguard your autonomy and safety. Most importantly, do not let fear take over your mind, for that is the ultimate goal of the obsessed, to rob you of freedom in thought, action, and even sleep. Treat warning signs like an alarm bell, a reminder that you need to be proactive and firmly hold onto control of your life. Because only when you protect your own boundaries can you truly live in peace, unthreatened by anyone, even those closest to you. Safety and privacy are not merely rights but the solid foundation upon which a meaningful and fulfilling life is built. Never underestimate the first warning signs. Trust your intuition, act strategically, and do not hesitate to seek help when needed. Only then can you truly reclaim the peace and sovereignty you deserve in the beloved home you have painstakingly built. In those seemingly harmless little moments, when a neighbor's words touch on details you have never shared, that is the first warning ringing clearly in your mind. It is not a coincidence but a clear sign that your personal boundaries are gradually being invaded. You are not the only one going through this. We all have to remind ourselves not to overreact, so as not to be labeled paranoid or rude. But instinctive vigilance never betrays. It is the compass that helps you recognize hidden dangers that reason sometimes deliberately ignores to maintain peace. Karen, an ordinary woman living in a suburban neighborhood, once thought the neighbor's excessive interest was merely politeness or even kindness. But as the questions became increasingly personal and information she never disclosed was repeated accurately, suspicions started to creep in. Then, when a note about her trip unexpectedly appeared under the doormat after a private phone call, she could no longer dismiss it. This was no longer normal curiosity. It was intrusion, a sign of deliberate stalking. The shift from neighborly concern to obsession is not just a personal story but a warning for all of us. When someone begins to enter your private space without permission, when they assign themselves the role of protector or confidant, while isolating you from other relationships, that is not kindness. It is subtle manipulation, a controlling strategy aimed at suffocating your freedom and independence. In that trap, you become an object, a target for their influence and control. From a Stoic perspective, you cannot allow those actions to define you or break your inner peace. Marcus Aurelius once taught, "It is not events that disturb people, but their judgments about those events." That is why you need to build a protective wall with reason and prepared action. Record every detail, dates, times, conversation content, even the smallest irregularities, not to drown in anxiety, but to prepare for a reasonable and decisive response when necessary. This will create a solid foundation for you to confidently face any intrusion, from demanding the offender cease their behavior to seeking legal assistance. Do not hesitate to contact the police as soon as you notice the first signs, for they are trained to intervene and protect you before things escalate. Utilize the support network of trustworthy friends and family, because in these circumstances, emotional support is just as important as gathering evidence. Remember, the right to live safely and freely in your own home is not a privilege, but a fundamental right you deserve to have protected. When you act proactively, prepare thoroughly, and respond wisely, you not only protect your physical space but also preserve the peace of your soul, a place no one should ever violate. When predators lurking in the shadows begin to escalate, the first and most effective tactic they use is to isolate you from the world around you. This isolation not only suffocates your freedom but also weakens your greatest strength: connection. Friends, family, community, these are the invisible yet strongest shields protecting you from hidden dangers. This is not a direct confrontation, nor a battle you must fight alone. It is a journey to safeguard your life, your mind, and your right to exist in safety and peace, free from unnecessary fear. Obsession, in the way it usually comes, is never loud or obvious. It does not emit glaring signals for easy detection. Instead, it seeps in bit by bit, cleverly disguised under the pretense of politeness, concern, or even seemingly coincidental events that are hard to suspect. That is why noticing subtle changes and recognizing the first signs of intrusion are vital. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act to protect yourself despite fear. Instinct, ancient survival tools honed over thousands of years, always exists within you. Trust them. When a neighbor crosses the boundary and becomes an obsession, silence is no longer a protective shield but only causes you more harm. Only action and proactivity can keep you and your private space safe. If you've followed this far, congratulations, you are among the 1% who can clearly distinguish between genuine friendliness and the dangerous signs of a disguised stalker. You have equipped yourself with the knowledge to recognize traps, the stages of escalation, and most importantly, how to protect your sanctuary, your sacred space, before it turns into an unwanted personal reality show. Awareness is not living in fear. Awareness is the key to confidence and peace. It's like locking your door before the wolf even thinks of knocking. Proactive preparation to stop danger early. You deserve to live with a peaceful soul, curtains wide open, without doubting every rustle in the mailbox or shadow outside the window. So trust your instincts, fiercely yet wisely protect your personal space. And if these words have opened your eyes, don't stop here. Hit subscribe, join a community that won't leave you awake at night with one eye open, sharing, supporting, and strengthening mental resilience so no one has to face danger alone. And remember, the next video the algorithm brings you is no coincidence. It is the next shield on your journey to protect your life and mind. Click now, because your future self and your peace of mind will thank you greatly for it. This is not just a small action, but a decisive step to maintain your safety and independence in an increasingly complex world.